Hi everyone, welcome back to Backstage WA. My name is Shannon Morrison.
My name is Kaylin McPherson, and as you can see, we're in a very fancy new set. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with award-winning writer and director Ben Young.
Ben is here today to talk about Devil's Peak. He shot it over in the US and he actually brought the post-production back to WA. So let's start off by talking about your film, Hounds of Love.
Sure.
It received rave reviews and was considered your big break. Can you talk about that experience and the impact it had on your career?
It gave me a career. I started off as an actor, as a child actor, and then that all kind of dried up a little bit by the time I became 17 and I was presented with the choice, do I try and get into drama school or do something else? And I did a pre-audition course for one of the drama schools and it wasn't my jam. By then I'd kind of been on enough sets to figure out what to me acting was, and the whole idea of painting your dome and finding your inner animal and getting on all fours and meowing like a cat or barking like a dog just wasn't what I thought acting was about. So I enrolled in film school and studied screenwriting just because, and I think it's more relevant today than it was even then, but I saw how technology was changing so much that like my year was one of the first years that was editing digitally and we were shooting on tape, and just the year before us or a couple of years before us it was all still film. And so I thought to myself, like, well, obviously technology is going to keep evolving. So what's the point in learning any of this technology when it's probably going to be irrelevant by the time I get out of film school? So I'm going to focus on screenwriting because a story is a story is a story kind of thing. And so I did that. And, I made a whole bunch of short films. I even directed some kids' television, kind of mostly established myself doing music videos. But I was living sort of job to job, hand to mouth, all the way up until Hounds of Love. And so Hounds of Love was the 11th feature film script that I'd written and tried to get made. And it was the first one that got made. And I guess what that did is that projected me onto the world stage because it premiered at the Venice Film Festival and got some very generous reviews. Then literally, to use the old cliche, Hollywood came a-knocking and I ended up with a big fancy US manager and a big fancy US agent and a lawyer and all the stuff that you need, and then started getting offers. And so, Hounds of Love is really what gave me a career. Everything else I was doing before that was sort of like at the emerging level where I could barely scrape a living together, and so I could hardly call it a career and more of an obsessed hobby.
Yeah, they kind of call it the overnight success cliche, but it really is like that, especially with the US market and Hollywood.
Yeah, it took me 15 years to become an overnight success. I mean, like, everyone just sees that all of a sudden there's this new filmmaker who's made this movie, but they miss the 35 music videos you directed beforehand, the 8 short films, the 10 episodes of Bad Kids TV and all of that sort of stuff. So and 11 scripts that I wrote before Hounds of Love. So
You've described in a previous interview you're really focused on slow driven, character oriented stories.
Yep.
How would you say that influences your directing style overall?
Well, hugely, because I don't really care much for plot. Like there's an old cliche that
story.
What's that?
Plot versus story.
Yeah, plot versus story. And story is the journey for truth and plot is just the road you take to get there. And the what they mean by truth is a comment on humanity. And so I'm really drawn to very simple stories with very complicated characters. And you don't get much simpler than Hounds of Love. It's literally about a girl who wants to get out of a house where she's being held hostage. And so, it's a very, very simple narrative with hopefully some complex people involved in that.
Exactly right, yeah. And it reveals so much as well without them. That's that really nice kind of nuanced character development. It's just classic show, don't tell. It's a small cast. But I would say Evelyn is really the kind of emotional core of it, weirdly, even though
I would say
she's not
that
the
as
one
well.
who's in crisis and has that really obvious external motivation to get out of the house because she's been kidnapped. But her internal kind of conflict really
Her
had
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, there was so much to explore there throughout the film, and I think
you're
really
right.
interesting.
The way I identify whose movie, whose story a movie is by who has the biggest arc. And Evelyn certainly has the biggest arc in that film. And fun fact, the first draft was written exclusively from her point of view, but certain people above my pay grade were telling me that you cannot make a movie from a serial killer's point of view. It's not palatable. It's not palatable. So I wrote all of this stuff and told it all from Ashley Cummings' point of view. But then we got in the edit, and that story, Ashley did a great job, but that story just wasn't interesting. And so the edit of the movie is far closer to the first draft of the script than the shooting draft of the script. A character doesn't need to be likable. They need to be interesting.
Yeah,
that's 100%. All there is to it.
That was your 11th script, Hounds
Yes.
of Love. That was your kind of, before you got that big overnight break. Is that kind of a trend with your scripts that you enjoy writing characters that are more kind of morally ambiguous or complex, and so you get to kind of uncover the psychology?
Well, not everything I've written is about dark characters. Believe it or not, the first feature film script I wrote was a rom-com. But I think what I'm interested in is characters in complex relationships. And then that usually allows you to explore a complicated psychology. And for example, just if anyone is interested in writing, part of my process is I start with the characters and I start with a complicated emotional situation that they're in. And then I'm like, all right, well, that's what I want to explore. What can the story be? And the story can often be something that you wouldn't think is a movie story. So I've just written a new script, which I love. It makes Hounds of Love look like a Disney movie. But essentially the plot of this new movie is about a woman trying to raise money for a vet bill. That sounds like the most boring movie ever. But she's in some pretty complicated personal stuff. And so that is what I hope will make the story interesting.
Going back to what you said earlier, that you started off in acting, do you find that benefits your directing style a bit more?
Yes, a lot. And that's a good observation. And I would recommend, as much as it will suck, I would recommend that everybody who wants to be a director does an acting class. But mostly so they come to understand how difficult acting is. And so the biggest thing that I got from being an actor and having acted is how often the director made me uncomfortable. And so I just treat actors the way I wish I had been treated when I was an actor. So it's not so much about knowing the process and all this kind of stuff. It's about collaborating, and it's about respect.
Yeah, not treating them like you're a piece of meat and I'm just going to say, act sad, act happy.
And I got a lot of that, you know. I got a lot of blink more. No, on that line, do that. Run your hand through your hair, and you know. And I got directors doing line reads at me, and
it shows you as well how hard it is to make it feel real. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not very good. I would say I'd probably come across wooden if I did act, because it's so hard to, even though you think I'm doing everything a real person would do in this situation, but it's hard to get that really nuanced
I think a lot of that is
up
to the director to do. I mean, and I think it's bullshit, but there's so much of a false order of how things are supposed to be run on a set. And it's like, well, why? A lot of this is a hangover from film days where, you know, you need everybody running at the same time because you're burning tape or you're burning film or all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't cut between takes anymore, and I don't say action. I just go, okay, we're rolling. Whenever you're ready, go into it. And then I don't say cut. I say, okay, cool. We're still rolling. So why don't you just do it again? And I say it at about the same level that I just said now, because it's about making people feel relaxed. And if it's like, all right, everyone quiet, go in 3, 2, 1, action. You know, you can't help but do that. And so if you're just rolling and, you know, you see me walking into dailies just whispering stuff in actors' ears as the camera's rolling. Because the minute that you say cut, then all these million makeup people run onto set and a million props people run onto set and they start doing all this shit that takes the actors out of the thing.
Guilty me on production design. I cannot wait to run onto set and fix something.
Oh, yeah. And I hate it when they do that, because more often than not, they'll fix something so it'll be different in this take. But
continuity.
And when you get into post, you'll realize that you want to use the first part from take 2 and the last part from take 4, but you can't, because the plant in the background has been moved like that much over or something. So
So Devil's Peak, based on the book
Where All Light Tends to Go
by David Joy. What was that experience like?
I think that it was without a doubt the toughest experience of my career, but probably not for the reasons that you would think. The actors were fantastic, and I think that one of the joys about working in the States, we shot the movie in Atlanta, well, just outside of Atlanta, mostly in a place called Cartersville. I loved working with the actors on that. They were all absolutely fantastic, such generous people, so great to collaborate with, and all really, really nice, which was great. And one of the joys in working in a state like Georgia, where so many productions happen, is, everybody, even your, as we call them, the 50 worders, were all, recurring roles on shows like Cobra Kai and Stranger Things. And so they were all so good. And so I never had to cut around a shitty performance from, supporting character because everyone was so great. So that was really good. But there were production challenges put on us that I have never experienced in my life and hope to never experience again.
Like, to a certain extent, you get that power that comes with clout and having your name out there, but it would still be a big adjustment, I think, from working on relatively kind of indie cinema where you're having real creative control.
Well, it's interesting because I've done television too, and in that the director is really just a gun for hire, and you have very little creative control, and that's sort of fine, and you let that go before you get there. It's all cast without you, mostly, unless you've got a character who's just in your episode. Most of the locations are found, and you kind of let that go, and that's all cool. Extinction was interesting. There was so much that was great about working on that, mostly the scale of the production and the time that we had to do everything. But I was very limited in what I was allowed to do. I kind of had to justify every decision that I made. And ultimately, what I wanted to do with the final edit was dismissed. And, the movie that was put out there was not as I would have liked the movie to be put out there. Then something like Where All Light Tends to Go. I keep saying that. That's the book. It used to be called that, but they changed the name to Devil's Peak, which I wish they hadn't. And but with that movie, I did have 100% creative control. I could make script changes without having to get them ticked off by producers or by studios or anything like that. And same deal in the edit. I could have very strong feedback from people, which I did, but I didn't have to listen to them. I did mostly though. But then the limitations on that were, I had 24 days to shoot a movie that has got car chases in it and, guns going off and movie stars and all of these things that traditionally take time. I mean, there's 18 minutes of the final movie I shot in 2 days. I mean, there's so much of Devil's Peak that I didn't shoot just because we ran out of time. And yeah, so much compromise. 24 days to shoot a movie of that scale is ridiculous.
Especially, we were actually lucky enough to see some of the edit take place, some of the colour grading.
Do you remember that? We came in and we sat. This was like
yes,
we kind of just sat for half an hour. I think
I
while they
do
were
remember
colour grading.
Yep.
I think it was a scene in a car, and it was just it was so intense. It was great. It was like that leaf's slightly off, and then they make the minuscule change, and you're like, whoa, that looks so much better, and you just don't think about that stuff. But it was at the Backlot Perth. That's one of our supporters.
Yeah,
it's a great post-production facility.
A great post-production facility. I've done 2 movies there now.
Colour grading is so underrated, I think.
I mean, I think everything with making a movie, if you notice it, it sucks. So it's about creating a subconscious feeling within the audience. But no, bringing the post back to Perth, there's a few reasons why I wanted to do it, but more so, I'm fortunate enough to have worked with post people all over the world now, and they've all been great, but none of them have been better than anyone that I've worked with in Perth. And ultimately, my goal would be to make international projects in Perth because, as it was, I brought a West Australian cinematographer over with me as well. I brought a West Australian actor over with me. So it's, I think in the end, about 50% of the people who worked on the movie are Western Australian. And there's other Australians in there as well, like Harrison Gilbertson, and our stunt driver was Australian from Melbourne. And so, yeah, I mean, we can do it. And I think that we've got such beautiful weather in Western Australia, such talented people and such spectacular locations. And now we've got a studio being built as well. Like I want to try and get us on the map as a place that can conceivably deliver world-class material,
What would be your advice for people starting out? They say kind of, you've got to go over east. That's the narrative for a lot. What would be your advice?
Everyone has said to us.
I can think of 5 West Australian feature film directors and all of them bar one still live here. You got grants to make short films here. You got grants to make feature films here. You got grants for script development here. You got way less competition. So my approach was, this is what I always knew when going forward. It's like, why not try and make the absolute most that I can from the opportunities that I've got here and try and make something which brings me over East or brings me internationally. And fortunately, that's exactly what happened. And, my commitment to that strategy was sort of confirmed when I saw the success that Zach Hilditch had with These Final Hours.
Yeah, it's really, and we're about to get this big injection of resources as well with the studio. So,
I mean, there's always been, I don't want to call it a healthy competition, but certainly when I was coming up, there's little groups of people at about the same level who form their own little gangs and get competitive with each other and, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, I have found West Australians, everyone knows each other because it's small. And I have found that it's generally speaking a very supportive community. Like when I was coming up, I had access to the most established West Australian directors and producers. And, I'd become friends with them by seeing them at events. And then when I had a script or a short film that needed notes on, I say, look, I'll buy you lunch if you give me notes on this script or if you watch my short film or whatever. And I had access to them and they made my stuff better, and I've always said that there's two reasons why anybody gets involved in any of the arts. And one is result. And the other is process. And if you don't love the process, you're always going to be miserable because 9 times out of 10, you don't get the result that you want. If your result is getting an Oscar nomination or, getting rich and famous or all of that crap, and that's why you become a filmmaker or an actor, you are going to have a miserable and a disappointing life. But if you can love the process and, write a screenplay and send it out to everyone and get rejected for funding and shot down and all of this stuff, but still remind yourself that, man, I enjoyed writing that and spending time with those characters, then you're in it for the right reasons. And the same can be said that when you make a movie, if it gets ripped apart by the reviews or whatever, it's like, all right, well, that sucks, but, what an experience working with this person and learning that and learning this. The process is the long part of filmmaking, the years that it takes to write and develop something and then go and shoot something and go and edit something. So that's the part you need to fall in love with.
Speaking of Devil's Peak, what is in the peak of your future?
So I've written a new screenplay, which I have maybe attached an actress to already. But this is very early days with this one, and it's going to be a very hard sell because it makes Hounds of Love look like a Disney movie. And other than that, you got to eat. So I'm writing on a new TV show, and I'm slated to direct a different TV show in the middle of the year.
Thank you so much for coming here to chat with us, Ben. Devil's Peak will be out, I believe, February 17th.
It's out February 17th in the US. As of this very moment, I have no idea what's happening with the Australian release.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Universal for inviting us to see Women Talking this month. Do you want to run us through the plot?
Yeah, so basically Women Talking set in kind of a Mennonite community in America, I believe, and basically following this string of really horrible sexual assaults and violence by men in the village. It's about the women kind of getting together and talking, women talking, to decide whether they should stay and fight or leave, and it's this really great kind of, it's not really a one-room drama, but it's just really great, very dialogue-driven plot, and it's very emotional and very male-driven society.
Yeah.
So the women don't know how to read or write. I think one of the opening lines as well say, we never learned to read or write, but then today we had to learn how to vote, something similar to that, and they do it kind of by just sketching very rudimentary voting systems. The cast is phenomenal. We have Claire
Foy, my
fans.
queen.
We love the Crown,
actual queen.
We love Jessie Buckley as well, Ben Whishaw. It was pretty cool.
I'm not one who
like,
usually likes
cringing.
movies like this, with one of my favorite movies being Pacific Rim.
Yeah,
that
this
should
versus
tell
Pacific
you
Rim.
what type of movies I like. But no, I was gripped the entire way through.
It was dialogue.
Yeah.
Was great. I don't know. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you don't think you'd like this movie, I think you really would.
Definitely. And you find yourself going along on like the moral debate as well. You find yourself thinking about every perspective, and it was just so interesting.
I would recommend it 100%.
So I think I'm going to give it a final 4 out of 5. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 too.
Thank you everyone so much for watching and or listening to this, our first official episode in our amazing new set in the studio.
Yeah. How crazy is that LED screen behind us?
We're not actually in a
actually at the theatre, unfortunately, but we are fortunately at Limitless Studios.
Yep,
An
one of our
incredible studio in
biggest
West
supporters.
Perth in the Pickle District.
Yeah, they're just hitting it all with all the like technical stuff, the
Yeah.
set and everything. We're so grateful as well, and also to the Backlot and Ian from the Backlot just for being an amazing support. They really together provided so much
We wouldn't be
work.
on this
It's great.
couch right now if it wasn't for Ian
Literally.
at the Backlot. So
because they all brought the couch in. They literally would not be on this couch. And it wouldn't be looking so absolutely incredible if it weren't for Limitless as well. So
Yeah.
they've both been such an amazing support, providing the resources and connections to make this happen, which is very, very cool. And what better way to start this first episode than having Ben Young as a guest as well.
incredible
great.
local talent.
Thank you for everyone who's supporting this, even just by watching it. Like, you have no idea how much it means. So thank you so much, and we'll see you back in the next episode in this awesome set.